Before we tell you anything else about this place, we need to tell you the rule. It is illegal to die here, not metaphorically, not as a turn of phrase. There is an actual, enforced regulations in this town that prohibits its residents from dying within its borders. If you receive a terminal diagnosis, cancer, organ failure, the quiet settling of old age, you will be evacuated by plane to mainland Norway to live out your final days somewhere warmer, somewhere softer, somewhere the earth will accept your body when the time comes. Because here, the ground will not. The permafrost that runs hundreds of meters beneath the surface of this Arctic archipelago preserves everything placed inside it with a fidelity that no undertaker could match. Bodies buried here in the early 20th century were found, decades later, still intact, still recognizable, still carrying, in their frozen tissue, active viral remnants of the 1918 Spanish influenza, one of the most lethal pandemic strains in human history. The cemetery here stopped accepting new burials in the 1950s. Since then, dying here has simply not been permitted. Welcome to Longyearbyen, Svalbard, the world's northernmost permanently inhabited settlement, sitting at 78 degrees north latitude, halfway between the coast of Norway and the geographic North Pole. A town of approximately 2,500 people on an Arctic archipelago, where polar bears outnumber humans, where 4 months of the year the sun does not rise at all, where every person who steps outside the town perimeter is legally required to carry a rifle, and where the most fundamental human act, the quiet surrender of a body to the ground, is forbidden by law. The question is not how they live here. The question is why. Stand at the edge of Longyearbyen and look in any direction. What you see is not countryside. It is not wilderness in the way that word is usually used. That comfortable, recreational, manageable kind of wild that comes with footpaths and visitor centers and mobile phone reception. What you see from the edge of this town is something altogether older and more absolute. Mountains of black rock and ancient ice rise on every side, their summits shredded by wind into jagged ridgelines that cut the sky like broken teeth. The Adventfjord stretches below the town, its water a deep, almost metallic blue-black in the cold light, rimmed with sea ice that shifts and groans with the tides. Glaciers pour down the valley walls in slow geological rivers, their blue-white faces calving into the fjord with sounds like distant gunshots that echo off the mountains and fade into nothing. There are no trees here, not one. The soil is too thin, the growing season too short, the permafrost too close to the surface for any tree to find purchase. The landscape is what geologists call tundra, low, scrubby sparse, but in winter, even that disappears beneath a depth of snow that transforms the entire archipelago into a single, unbroken plain of white. The nearest city, Tromsø, on the Norwegian mainland, is approximately 1,800 kilometers south. There are no roads connecting Svalbard to the mainland, no ferry service, no tunnel through the ocean floor. The only way in or out of Longyearbyen is by air, and when Arctic storms descend, which they do regularly, without negotiation, the airport closes. The town becomes, for hours or days at a time, completely unreachable. In those moments, sealed in by weather, surrounded by glaciers, under a sky that has not shown the sun for 3 months. Longyearbyen becomes, in a very literal sense, the most isolated inhabited place on the surface of this planet. Light in Svalbard does not behave like light anywhere else on Earth. From late October to mid-February, roughly 110 days, the sun does not rise above the horizon, not once. This is the polar night, and it is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. It is a physical, measured, astronomical fact. The sun is below the horizon for the entirety of those months, and the sky passes through a daily cycle of deep navy blue to a brief twilight blush at noon and back to black. Residents here call that noon twilight the blue hour, and they speak of it with a reverence that visitors find unexpected. Because after weeks of total darkness, even that faint suggestion of pale light on the southern horizon feels like a miracle. Then, in reverse, summer arrives. From late April to mid-August, approximately 4 months, the sun does not set. It circles the horizon continuously, tracing a slow ellipse across the sky. Present at midnight, present at 3 in the morning, present when you wake and when you sleep, and when you eat dinner at 11 at night. The Arctic summer light is extraordinary, low-angled, golden, soft, painting everything in a continuous golden hour that never ends and never fades. Residents learn to manage both extremes with their curtains. Heavy blackout fabric is not a luxury in Svalbard. It is a fundamental tool for sleeping during the midnight sun. Just as the community's various strategies for managing the polar night are not eccentricities but serious, practiced adaptations. Light here is not background. It is not incidental. It is the primary organizing fact of life, governing sleep, mood, biology, and the internal clockwork of every person who tries to make this place home. The Svalbard landscape does not merely exist beneath the light. It is defined by it, transformed by it, made luminous and terrible and unutterably beautiful by its extremity. Let us now deal with some numbers. Not because numbers are interesting in themselves. They rarely are. But because the numbers of Svalbard are the kind that stop a conversation. There are approximately 500 people living in Longyearbyen. There are approximately 3,000 polar bears on the Svalbard archipelago as a whole. This means that, at any given moment, the bears outnumber the residents by a ratio of roughly 6 to 5. Every person who leaves the town boundary on foot is legally required by Norwegian law to carry a firearm. Not recommended. Required. The last time a polar bear killed someone in Longyearbyen was in 2020, when a young Dutch tourist was attacked at a campsite. The town has no interconnecting roads to anywhere. 0. The road network of Longyearbyen is entirely internal. It covers roughly 50 kilometers and ends abruptly at the town boundary where the wilderness begins. Svalbard is the only place on Earth with completely visa-free access for citizens of any nationality in the world. Due to the 1920 Svalbard Treaty, signed by 46 nations, any person from any country may enter, reside, and work in Svalbard without requiring a Norwegian visa, residency permit, or work permit of any kind. The result is one of the most genuinely international communities in the world. Longyearby's population at any given time includes citizens from over 50 different countries. Every single resident of Longyearbyen is, by definition, a person who chose this. A morning in Longyearbyen in January begins in total darkness. Not the near darkness of an overcast winter morning in Oslo or Edinburgh, but absolute, complete astronomical dark. The kind of dark that has no gradient, no light pollution bleeding in from nearby cities, no ambient glow from anything. At 7 in the morning, the sky outside every window is the same color it was at midnight, a deep, cold black scattered with stars. The first task of any morning in polar winter is confronting this. The alarm sounds. The room is dark. The body? Following millions of years of evolutionary instruction to equate darkness with rest, resists. The biological argument for staying in bed is overwhelming. Residents counter it in various ways. Special wake-up lights that simulate sunrise, strict routine, sheer willpower. But everyone here acknowledges that January mornings are a negotiation with their own nervous system. Outside, the temperature is somewhere between -15 and -25. A standard morning. People walk to work bundled in layers that would seem comical to a visitor from Southern Europe. Thermal base layers, fleece mid-layers, windproof outer shells, face coverings, goggles, and yet here feel entirely ordinary. Children are walked to school by parents who are themselves warmly wrapped and often carrying their legally required firearm in a shoulder holster beneath their coat. The main street of Longyearbyen is wide and low and deeply functional. There are no grand buildings, no architectural ambition, just the practical shapes of a settlement built for survival. But the buildings are painted in those familiar Nordic colors, red, yellow, blue, that make the town feel, against all odds, warm, approachable, almost cheerful, in the way that a lit window looks cheerful against snow. Inside the local cafe, the espresso machine runs from the moment the doors open. Svalbard has one of the highest per capita coffee consumptions in the world. This is not a coincidence. No food grows in Svalbard, not a vegetable, not a fruit, not a grain. The permafrost, the cold, the near total absence of growing season, roughly frost-free sweep per year, makes agriculture on the archipelago essentially impossible. Everything that appears on a plate in Longyearbyen has been transported here, either by weekly cargo flights from mainland Norway or by the supply ships that navigate the fjords in the ice-free summer months. The result is a supermarket that feels both completely familiar and faintly surreal. The shelves are well stocked. Norwegian dairy, imported vegetables, bread, pasta, coffee, wine. But everything is slightly more expensive than it would be on the mainland, reflecting the cost of getting it here. Residents accept this the way they accept the darkness and the cold, as simply the price of the place. But food in Svalbard is not only about logistics, it's also about hunting. The archipelago has a long tradition of subsistence hunting, reindeer and ptarmigan, primarily, that continues today under carefully managed quotas. Every autumn, a significant portion of Longyearbyen's residents participate in the reindeer hunt, heading out onto the tundra with their legally mandated firearms for an entirely different purpose. The meat goes into freezers and onto dinner tables throughout the winter months. Arctic char, a fish native to the cold, clean rivers and lakes of the high Arctic, is caught locally and eaten fresh or cured. It is mild and clean, tasting like the cold, clear water it came from. The best meal in Longyearbyen, residents will tell you, is not from the restaurants, though those are surprisingly excellent, but from a kitchen table in someone's home, where reindeer stew has been simmering since morning, and the darkness outside makes the warmth inside feel like something hard-won and deeply precious. Longyearbyen exists, historically, because of coal. The town was founded in 1906 by an American businessman named John Munro Longyear, who recognized the commercial potential of the enormous coal seams running through the mountains of the archipelago. For nearly a century, coal mining was the reason people came to Svalbard, the reason they stayed, and the economic foundation of everything the settlement was built on. The last Norwegian coal mine on Svalbard, Mine 7, suspended regular operations in 2023. The era of mining as the economic backbone of Longyearbyen is effectively over. What replaced it is perhaps the most unexpected pivot in the history of any Arctic settlement. Svalbard today is primarily a scientific and research hub. The archipelago hosts more than 30 active research stations: Norwegian, Russian, Polish, German, French, Korean, Indian, all drawn here by the same reality: that the Arctic is the place where climate change is accelerating fastest, and that to understand what the planet is doing, you must come here and watch. The other major industry is tourism. Roughly 100,000 visitors come to Svalbard each year, a staggering number for a settlement of 2,500, drawn by the northern lights, the polar bear safaris, the midnight sun, and the particular quality of standing at the edge of the habitable world and feeling the enormity of it pressing against you. The school in Longyearbyen is one of the most extraordinary educational institutions on the planet, though it does not advertise itself as such. It is a small building by global standards, a few hundred students across all year levels, but what makes it remarkable is the composition of its student body. At any given time, the children attending this school represent between 30 and 40 different nationalities. The school teaches in Norwegian, the official language of the archipelago, but the corridors ring with English, German, Russian, Thai, Filipino, Polish, and a dozen other languages, all mixed together in the ordinary social chaos of children who have collectively decided that differences between them are less interesting than the things they have in common. Childhood in Svalbard is, in many ways, extraordinary. Children here learn to ski before they learn to read. They grow up with a fluency in words that children in safer, more comfortable places never develop. They say they cannot imagine living anywhere else. Deep inside a mountain, 12 kilometers from Longyearbyen, sealed behind a series of locked doors, and embedded permanently in the permafrost, is a structure that exists to outlast everything. The Svalbard Global Seed was established in 2008 and currently holds over 1.3 million distinct seed samples, representing almost every food crop grown on Earth. Each one sealed in foil packets and stored at -18 degrees Celsius in a facility designed to remain functional for thousands of years without any human intervention. Its location in the permafrost of Svalbard was chosen precisely because the conditions that make this place inhospitable to human life make it ideal for long-term preservation. The vault is, in the plainest possible terms, humanity's backup hard drive for agriculture. It has already been used in anger once. In 2015, the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, headquartered in Syria, whose facilities were destroyed by the Civil War, withdrew seeds it had deposited before the conflict. The Doomsday Vault functioned exactly as designed, as insurance against the kind of catastrophe that no one believes will happen until it does. There is something both deeply reassuring and quietly terrifying about the fact that this place exists. That somewhere, a committee of thoughtful people looked at the trajectory of human civilization and concluded, we should prepare for the possibility that we destroy most of what sustains us. And then they built a room in a mountain in the Arctic and filled it with seeds and locked the door. Weather in Svalbard is not a topic of small talk. It is not the comfortable conversational lubricant that it is in Britain, or a subject of mild inconvenience, the way it is in New York. In Svalbard, the weather is a character, one with opinions, moods, and a well-documented capacity for violence. Arctic storms arrive here with a speed and ferocity that can catch even experienced residents off guard. In the course of a single afternoon, a clear sky with temperatures of -15 can transform into a whiteout blizzard with winds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour and visibility reduced to meters. The wind is the most constant and most demanding presence. Svalbard sits in the path of the polar vortex, the rotating system of cold air that circles the Arctic, and when that vortex weakens or shifts, its effects are felt immediately. And yet there is beauty in this too, of a kind that is difficult to describe to anyone who has not experienced it. When the Arctic sky clears after a storm, when the last threads of cloud dissolve and the air goes perfectly still, the world that is revealed is something close to otherworldly. The light, refracted through ice crystals suspended in the ultra-cold air, produces halos and sundogs and arcs of prismatic color that appear to hang, motionless, above the mountains. Residents describe these moments with a particular reverence, as if the violence of the weather and the beauty it leaves behind are part of the same contract, as if the storm is the and the clarity is the reward. Here is something that surprises every first-fitter visitor to Longyearbyen. The internet is excellent, not adequate, not acceptable given the circumstances. Actually excellent, fast, reliable, ubiquitous. Exactly what you would expect in a well-connected European city. The isolation of Svalbard is physical. It is not informational. The result is a community that occupies two realities simultaneously. In one reality, it is a remote Arctic settlement where polar bears patrol the perimeter and the sun does not rise for a third of the year. In the other, it is plugged fully into the same global digital infrastructure as London, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo. This collision of extremes, ancient wilderness and modern connectivity, gives Svalbard a quality that is entirely its own. The wildness is not diluted by the connectivity. If anything, the contrast sharpens both. The darkness outside is darker because the screen inside is so bright. The best way to understand Longyearbyen is as a place that refuses to choose between ancient and modern. It contains both simultaneously and completely. Communities in extreme places operate on rules that are never written down. In Longyearbyen, this takes a particular form. The town is too small and the winters too long for the normal urban habit of indifference. You live in a settlement of 2,500 people in the dark for 4 months. Everyone is, eventually, part of everyone else's story. Residents describe a culture of casual, practical solidarity that visitors find striking. If someone's car breaks down on the way to the airport in a storm, strangers stop, not out of unusual goodness, but because the alternative, in these conditions, is unacceptable. There is an annual festival in Svalbard called the Dark Season Blues, a week of concerts, events, and communal activity held in October, precisely as the polar night begins and the last light disappears. It is, in its way, a collective act of defiance against the dark, an agreement renewed every year by the entire community. To face the long night together, ask residents of Longyearbyen what they are most proud of, and the answers are more varied than you might expect from a place this small. Some will point to the research. Svalbard hosts more than 30 active research stations and has produced scientific data that has fundamentally changed our understanding of Arctic ecology, climate change, and the geological history of the polar regions. Others will point to the wilderness itself. Approximately 65% of Svalbard's land area is protected as national parks or nature reserves, one of the highest percentages of any territory on Earth. But perhaps the deepest pride is in the pride of having chosen difficulty, of having looked at a list of places in the world where a person might live and said, that one, the one where it is -25 in January, the one where you cannot bury your dead, the one where the bears will kill you if you are careless, that one. There is a particular quality of self-possession that comes from choosing the hard thing and then making it work. Residents of Longyearbyen carry it without vanity, but they carry it. The most persistent misconception about Svalbard is that it is miserable. Outsiders hear the facts, the darkness, the cold, the bears, the prohibition on dying, and construct a mental image that resembles a prison colony more than a home. Every single one of these assumptions is wrong. Longyearbyen has a restaurant scene that would not embarrass a city 5 times its size. There is a craft brewery. There is an arts center. There is a museum of Arctic history that is genuinely one of the finest in the world. The quality of life here, by almost every material measure, is high. The polar night is, for those who have adapted to it, not universally dreaded. Many residents describe the polar night with a warmth that surprises visitors. The darkness forces a particular kind of interiority, more time indoors, more conversation, more reading, more cooking, more deliberate cultivation of warmth and light inside the home. The northern lights are visible every clear night. The stereotype of suffering does not survive contact with the actual people. What you find is not endurance, it is satisfaction. There is a man who has lived in Longyearbyen for 31 years. He came originally on a 2-year contract. A mining engineer in his late 20s, taking an interesting job in an unusual place before returning to mainland Norway to do whatever came next. The contract ended. He renewed it. Then again. Then again. Then, at some point in his mid-30s, the question of when he was going back ceased to make sense to him. He was not in Svalbard on the way to somewhere else. He was simply there. He speaks about the place with a specificity that only comes from decades of close attention. He knows the fjord in every season. He knows which mountain ridges collect snow in the particular way that creates avalanche risk, and which valleys shelter a reindeer herd through the worst of winter. His children grew up here. They left. He understands the pull of a larger world. He felt it himself once. What? He cannot explain when asked directly. Is precisely the thing that everyone wants to know. Why this place and not another? He considers the question for a long time. Then he says something that is both very simple and very exact. He says, "Here, I always know where I am." He does not mean geographically. She left Longyearbyen at 19 to study medicine at the University of Oslo. 5 years of university. Then a residency in Tromsø. Then a position at a hospital in Bergen, a city of 280,000 people on Norway's western coast with normal winters, normal summers, a tram system, restaurants on every corner, a functioning cemetery. She returned to Longyearbyen at 34. Not for lack of options. She chose to come back because, as she put it, she had spent 15 years being a slightly flattened version of herself. She said that living in a normal place, a place with no particular demands, no particular extremity, had made it very easy to coast, to take the path of least resistance in every small decision, to become, slowly and without noticing, someone slightly less vivid than she had been. Svalbard does not permit coasting. When you live somewhere that requires your full attention to survive comfortably, she says, you discover that your full attention is actually a rather nice way to go through life. She runs the medical clinic in Longyearbyen now. She knows every patient by name. She goes ski touring on her days off, rifle across her back. She does not miss Bergen. There is a glacier visible from the town center of Longyearbyen. Long-term residents remember it differently than it looks today. They have photographs, not very old photographs, sometimes taken in the 1980s or 1990s, in which the glacier's face reaches significantly further forward. Its ice fillings a portion of the valley that is now bare rock. Svalbard is warming at roughly 5 times the global average rate. This is not a projection or a model. It is a measured, documented, empirical fact recorded by the research stations on the archipelago over decades of continuous observation. The scientists who study this are not alarmist about it. They are precise. They describe what they see with the careful, neutral language of measurement, and the measurements themselves are alarming enough without dramatization. The glacier that you can see from the center of Longyearbyen is retreating. Every year it is a little further away. Every year the bare rock behind it, gray and raw and newly exposed, extends a little further. In this single visible fact, the town's past and its future are simultaneously legible. The young people of Longyearbyen carry a particular weight. They have grown up in the most unusual schools in the world, in the most unusual community in the world, in a landscape of such extreme beauty and such documented fragility, that the relationship between what they have and what they may lose is not abstract for them. Many will leave. Most do, for a time, to go to university on the mainland to experience the wider world that their internationally composed school has given them an unusually global window onto. Some come back. Not all, but some. Drawn by something that is difficult to name precisely, but that everyone who has experienced it seems to recognize immediately. There is a quality to life at this level of extremity that, once you have known it, makes certain other qualities of life feel insufficient. Not worse, just less present. The ones who come back, the ones who choose the difficulty again, on purpose, as adults, they tend to be the ones who shape what comes next. At 4 a.m. in January in Longyearbyen, the silence is of a kind that requires a new vocabulary to describe accurately. It is not urban quiet. It is not rural quiet. Arctic quiet, which is another thing entirely. It is a silence that feels physical, that has weight and texture, that presses against the ears with the same insistence that the cold presses against exposed skin. The sky is completely black. There are stars of a clarity that is almost violent. Not the wan, selective starscape visible from the edge of a city, but the full depth of the galaxy. The Milky Way as a physical structure overhead, every star distinct and burning and indifferent. In winter, when the aurora is active, curtains of green and violet light move across this sky in slow, silent waves. The mountains are invisible in the dark, but their presence is felt. A particular quality of enclosed space, a sense of walls rising on every side. The fjord is frozen. The town is completely still, standing in the center of Longyearbyen at this hour. In this cold, under this sky, you feel something that is difficult to name and impossible to replicate anywhere less extreme. It is not peace, exactly. It is not loneliness. It is something closer to the feeling of being very small in the presence of something very large. And discovering that this is, against all expectation, a comfort rather than a threat. People who have lived in genuinely isolated, genuinely extreme places tend to describe the same shift. Not immediately. Not in the first weeks, when the novelty is still operating. But after some months, after the first polar night, usually something changes in the way the person relates to their own life. The things that seemed urgent before begin to seem less so. What remains, when those things are stripped away, is something surprisingly essential. The warmth of a fire in a room when it is -20 outside. The taste of food prepared carefully and eaten in company. The pleasure of sleep after a day of physical work in cold air. The particular quality of a conversation between people who depend on each other and know it. And you feel, against all expectation, completely fine. More than fine. Awake. Present. Exactly where you are. We have spent time in the darkness of January and the relentless light of July. We have seen the glacier retreating, and the bears patrolling, and the children skiing to school. We have eaten reindeer stew in someone's kitchen and stood in the extraordinary silence of 4 a.m. under a sky full of stars. And we return, now, to the question we asked at the beginning. Why do people stay in a place that does not permit dying? The logistical answers are easy and true. The salaries in Svalbard are higher than on the mainland. There is no income tax on Svalbard. The quality of life, measured in the conventional way, is genuinely high. These are real reasons, and people cite them honestly. But they are not the whole answer. They stay because here, the deal is honest. The place makes no pretense about what it is. It is cold, and it is dark, and it is full of things that could kill you, and you cannot grow old in it, and it will outlast you, and it does not particularly care about your plans. And in that absolute honesty, in the refusal of this place to flatter or accommodate or make itself comfortable, people find something they had not expected. They find a clarity about their own choices that softer places had not given them. They stay because here, they know that they chose to be here. Every single day. It is the first day of February. After 110 days without a sunrise, the sun is going to clear the horizon today. Not for long, perhaps 20 minutes, before dropping below the mountains to the south and leaving the town in its usual blue-gray half-light. But the sun will be visible. Technically, astronomically, for the first time since October, the whole town knows this. It is called the Soleil Festival, the return of the sun, and it is the most important celebration in Longyearby's calendar. Residents gather on a hillside above the town, where the angle is right to see the actual disk of the sun cresting the mountain ridge for the first time. They bring thermoses of coffee and wrap themselves in their warmest coats, and they stand there. Families, couples, researchers, guides, old-timers, and first-year arrivals, in the cold and the last moments of the polar night. And then it comes, the sun, pale and small and distant and impossibly beautiful. The light falls across the snow in long golden shadows and touches the faces of the people standing on the hillside. And there is, every year, a sound from the crowd that visitors describe as one of the most affecting things they have ever witnessed. Not cheering, exactly. Something quieter. Something between relief and gratitude and recognition. The sun sets again 20 minutes later. The people walk back down to town, back to their warm houses and their coffee, and their work and their lives at the end of the world. The bears are out there in the dark, beyond the perimeter. The glacier is retreating another millimeter. The seed vault in the mountain holds its breath. And the light, tomorrow, will last a little longer.